Hey, what's happening, everybody? Hang on, let me mess with my volume of this. There we go. That's a little bit better. How's it going? Happy Tuesday. I am back at it. We just had a stream not that long ago. I got Loki here. Oh God, Loki, be modest. Come on. Loki is going to be joining us for the stream tonight. We're going to be talking about an upcoming script that I've been wanting to work on for a little while now. Loki, please, don't mess with the microphone. Don't mess. No. He's just rubbing all over everything. Anyway, I want to start working on a new script. I thought that would be really fun for today. And so that's what we're going to be. Hey, thanks for the subscription, Lily. We're going to be going over a topic that I admittedly know some information about, but I would like to learn more. And that topic is about mental institutions or mental hospitals or insane asylums, as they might be sort of colloquially known as. So that is going to be the goal for today, is just learning a little bit today about those, why they disappeared, why they went away. And frankly, my goal is going to be to try to make a convincing argument for why they should come back. Oh my gosh, Loki. Here, I'm plugging my headphones. Anyway, that's the goal for today. Imaginator, glad to see you here. Happy to have you along. If you are joining right now, oh, hang on. Give me 1 second. That would explain it. All right, we are live. So apparently, for whatever reason, I had the stream had been set to private on YouTube, but now we are fully live. Twitch got to see just a little bit of extra content that you won't see anywhere else. I am still planning on uploading the videos, the VODs, at a later point, on this other channel that I started up. So you'll see those pop up there. But for today, what we're going to be doing is pretty much doing some research. What I want to do is learn more about asylums, about mental institutions, why they closed, what the purpose of that was, and then I guess also figure out some more information about, like, maybe we should bring them back, right? That might not be a super popular take. They need to be refilled immediately. Well, I am not on the path to try to, put every person who has mental health issues into some institution. But I think that they can be useful if they're done right. So that's going to be what we're going to be exploring, I think. So let's go over to... Oh, that's not what I wanted. Whoa. So many repeats of me. There, that's a little bit better. I had a camera that I was going to put Loki on, but then he ran away. So unfortunately, you'll just get my face instead. So the goal is to just start taking some notes. So this is my document. Here, let me make it a little bigger. There we go. This is my document for, the argument for reopening mental institutions. That's going to be the goal for today. As you can see, I've already done a ton of work. No, nothing at all. I actually think starting with the title can be helpful. I think I might need a little bit more information before I can come up with a title, but starting off with a good title can be a good place to begin. If you have title suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. I'm always open to, your thoughts. Also, I'm going to start up a poll over on YouTube. Apologies to the people over on Twitch or on Facebook. Well, mostly on Twitch, I guess. I guess I can do it on Facebook too, but Twitch doesn't let me do polls because I'm not an affiliate. I could be an affiliate. I have met the criteria to be an affiliate. But the problem is when you become an affiliate, you can't multi-stream. So you can only do that if you're a partner. So if those of you who are watching me over on YouTube right now, if you would like to help me make the best experience for everybody, and you use Twitch, you like using Twitch, you can go follow me over there. You do that. I'll just drop the link and I'll pin it. There you go. So now if you want to follow me over there, you can also watch me over there, and I do more than just script stuff. It can be very useful, but often the entrenched bureaucracy is not optimal or even helpful for patients. Yeah, that's a good. So as you guys are giving points, I'm actually going to be Egulf Twitler. It sounds a little bit like an insult or a euphemism. I'm just going to be taking some notes, so I appreciate that, Imaginator. Can be useful, but oh my gosh, bureaucracy can get in the way. Oh my gosh, patient care. I'll just take notes. Let's see here. Hey, Axiom, glad to see ya. Okay, we're actually going to block you. Thank you, though. All right. Might have to start using Twitch if you're on it. Yeah, absolutely. Staff is often just checking the boxes. Well, that's the worry, right? Is that if it's not regulated enough, that opens the door for abuse potential, right? Or for people to be treated poorly. And if there's too much, then that can get in the way of it being an effective form of treatment. So you got to find that nice balance. And I think it's possible. Yo, happy to see that you came from over from YouTube. All right, here's what I'm thinking I want to do first. I want to watch a video and just sort of see what else is out there in the YouTube world. So, why mental hospitals closed? We'll just get a little bit of history. As you can see, I already have done a little bit of looking into this, but I think it would be a good place to, for all of us to get a little bit of info. It's 17 minutes. We'll see how good it is. If we should keep watching. It seems boring, and we'll leave it. Let's see what we can find out. So this is from Reason TV.
On January 3rd, 1999, a man named Andrew Goldstein wandered onto this New York City subway platform and shoved a stranger named Kendra Webdale into the path of an oncoming train. With the story making national news, reporters dug into Goldstein's past and found that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had a history of violent episodes. He had been in and out of psychiatric facilities, but his caretakers repeatedly released him back into the streets against their better judgment because of a shortage of available beds.
All right, I'm gonna pause there real quick. This is probably one of the biggest reasons to bring back mental hospitals, right? Is essentially you have people who have severe mental health issues, who their only access to care is with, for example, a community mental health provider, but they are not equipped to necessarily to be able to provide consistent 24-hour care for someone. And likewise, people who have, for example, schizophrenia in this situation may not seek that out willingly too. And so the options are either they end up homeless on the street, and then commit some crime potentially, right? Or have some episode that gets the police called on them. The police then need to do something with this person, right? Because they're deemed some menace to society. And so they're either brought to, to whatever program they're a part of, if that's an option, if they know that, which most of the time they don't, or they're brought to a hospital and are 5150'd, which means they're put under an involuntary hold, which only lasts 72 hours. Or they're brought to, or they're charged with something and are brought to jail. And then they go through the legal system. And that's how you get these people who, it's like a revolving door, right? They start off just having a mental health issue, and it turns into this continuous, what's the word? Like churning, I guess, of having an episode, having the police called on you, ending up in the hospital or in jail, and that incurring a lot of consequences as a result. So anyway, that's one reason for, let's actually just put that in here just so we don't forget. Reasons for reopening. Ends the cycle of people going into the prison system or hospitals involuntarily and then being released back onto the street. So that's one obvious reason. Oh, hey, how's it going? Let's see. My part of the world, Canada, they were closed mainly because the government of the day wanted to save money as part of the whole 80s frenzy of neoliberalism. Yes, we will talk about that as well. This is me. I'm a formerly homeless person and it's bleak. No way. Authentic. Tell me more about that. I'd be really curious to hear your story. Hey, how's it going, 1776? Mental health professionals are in a workforce recession and now, and we need to support them better and educate new ones. Absolutely. I agree. I don't know if they're in a recession. I think there's a shortage of mental health professionals. That's my personal opinion. Loki really wants to be in the shot. Why don't you just lay down? Just lay down. Come on. Yeah. He's not going to. In reference to your topic, though, if we cater mental health resources specific to those affected with mental health afflictions, I think that having specialized facilities is important. Good. Yeah. Glad that you're in agreement. I for sure agree with the above comment too. Good. Oh, look. Now we can bring back the Loki cam. He's gonna hang out for a little bit, so maybe we'll. You can have the camera with him there. He really wants to lay on my keyboard, and I'm not gonna let him because he's gonna just end up typing all over a bunch of random characters. Don't do that, Loki. Oh my gosh. All right, there we go. Hey, Nick, how's it going? Glad to see you. Yeah, welcome to the chat. All right, so we just started this video. Let's keep going. Hey, Dan, also glad to see you here too.
The murder of Kendra Webdale brought attention to our inability to provide adequate treatment to Americans with severe mental health problems, which 20 years later is still ongoing. Prisons and jails are filled with inmates exhibiting symptoms of mental illness and in need of treatment.
Actually, real quick, let me just kind of Google this because I'm curious. What percent of people in jail, in jail have a mental illness? Incarceration Nation, let's see here. APA has information on this. Wow, okay. At least half of prisoners have some mental health concerns. 10 to 25% of U.S. prisoners suffer from serious mental illnesses, such as major affective disorders or schizophrenia. That's a lot. And that should be another reason for considering reopening these institutions that are specialized for treating people with mental health concerns, because prison obviously is not going to do a very good job, right? They are not targeted towards people who have serious mental health issues. So 10 to 25% of prison incarcerated people have serious. Thanks for the follow, Faceless 133. Mental health diagnoses. Half have mental health concerns. Honestly, it's better to focus on the folks with serious mental health diagnoses. Those are the people that are more likely to end up in prison or jail as a result of their diagnosis, rather than people who just have a diagnosis in general. Like if you have depression, that doesn't necessarily mean that is going to lead you to ending up in prison. Let's see. I wouldn't know where to start. I'm stable now, but I had severe issues myself. And although that's in remission now, access to care and support is a revolving door for me still. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that it gets better. It is a tough world out there, for sure, especially for mental health. We just need to do a whole lot more. We need more capital catered. We need more capital catered to the mental health field so that we can support those who work in the field and to assist in improving facilities to better accommodate those with mental health issues. I agree, Bryce. Yeah, I think if we put more money towards it, then obviously there will be more support for it. We'll be able to do a whole lot more, and this is always an issue with government funds in general, but like money ends up being spent on a lot of other things that maybe aren't as vital or important, but mental health has become a really intense issue. I mean, obviously, we've seen all of the issues surrounding like mass shooting events, for example, coming from people who have suffered really serious mental health concerns. And so like, it seems like a real security issue as well as just like a real humanitarian need for the country. Brenda, thanks for the subscription. Cats are beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Absolutely. Look at this cat. He just wants all the attention. Here, let me give you a zoom in on him. Say hi. All right. Well, Loki will hang out. I'm more familiar with the legal angle and the laws in many jurisdictions that really designed to treat mental illness as a public threat that needs to be managed. Yeah, exactly. That's typically the angle that's taken because, as I talked about in my video about police responding to mental health issues. The police are the ones that are showing up. When someone is having a serious episode, you call 911 and they send a couple of officers to go check out the situation. And so, like, when else do you call the police? Well, you call the police when there's a crime being committed, right? Or when someone has been wronged. And so, like, it really stigmatizes mental health when the police are the ones that respond to these situations. Medicaid patients, mostly the disabled and homeless, who are too young to retire, are the worst affected despite state expansions. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, tomorrow's 420. I forgot about that. Let's see. Hello. Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's hanging. Oh no, you distracted him. Let's see. When I was young, my mother used to work at a big psychiatric hospital for very unwell people in Adelaide, South Australia. Visiting her at work was always interesting. I bet. Yeah, they're interesting places. I used to, years back, work with people who had been recently incarcerated and the homeless population. And so I ended up going to psychiatric institutions pretty frequently. And they're not comfortable spaces, I gotta be honest. Like, you go into them and they don't feel like safe places. And I don't think that's by design. I think it's just, they're not treated like high-end facilities like you might find for giving birth or for treating cancer or for these other health issues that we find more valuable or important. I wish there were more resources available so that I could get more information and specialized support. Yeah, I agree. Mental illness is only a threat because mental health care is not a public priority. That's true. Sorry, I was like processing that. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of talk about prioritizing it, but then when it comes down to it, it kind of falls under the radar. I will say though, with the one of the biggest pieces of legislation I think that's happened in the last decade has been Obamacare, right, with the ACA, which included mental health as part of healthcare, right, as part of your insurance coverage. I think that was huge. So I think that has helped give access to mental health care for people who previously did not have it. All right, Loki wants to leave now, so let me let him out unless maybe if I keep him locked in, maybe he'll come back. Yeah, come here. Come here. Come here. Hi. All right. Let's see here. Discussion of reopening asylums. We need to consider the real importance of safety for patients, including the risk of COVID. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Safety should always be consideration. One fundamental issue with institutional care is continuity of care. Many therapists are cycled in and out and thus cannot build trust and dive deep. Or if they do, they can be cycled out and a new therapist assigned. Not good. Are you saying just in institutions generally? I think it kind of depends. If it's what I'm kind of proposing is reopening government institutions, government run rather than privately run. And I think government jobs tend to be pretty good, at least at the federal level. This is the problem, right? You have funds for federal programs that then get subdivided once you go into state programs, which then get subdivided once you get into county programs. And because a little bit has been skimmed off the top each way down, by the time you get to county programs, which make up a vast majority of the mental health programs that we have right now, there's very little money. They're trying to spread it as far as it can go, and it ends up spreading too thin. So, yeah, I think people in county mental health institutions are vastly underpaid, which is why you see that kind of turnover that you're talking about. You know, why people cycle in and out. So it would be interesting to I don't know, make the pay better. But all right, let's get back to the video here.
Many of the homeless people crowding the streets of cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York are mentally ill and in need of care. And violent episodes like the murder of Kendra Webdale have brought renewed calls to bring back one of America's most controversial institutions, the mental hospital, and to entrust the state with more authority to force psychiatric care on patients against their will.
Some psychiatrists and
Okay, so they're bringing up counterpoints, right? Reasons to not reopen or to be wary, right? So forcing people into institutions or into care that they may not want, right? They did it with their imagery, but they didn't really talk about it quite yet. History of abuse and unsafe. Well, actually, it would be more like abuse, unsafe practices, and like what's the word that I'm looking for? Like non-consensual treatment, or it's not really about consent necessarily, because be more like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Where you're like forcing someone to get care that may not be good for them and that they don't want. Well, let's just put unsafe practices and actually, this kind of goes with this point here. Oh my gosh. No autonomy. Let's just do this. Loss of autonomy. History of abuse, unsafe practices, and keeping patients drugged to subdue them. Coerce, yeah, coerce implies that you're like making someone, you're sort of like convincing them through force. It's really more just you're forcing them, I guess. But I was more thinking about like along the lines of unsafe practices. You know, you're giving care not because the patient needs it, but because it helps the like staff or the people who are running the institution. So, oh man, so many comments. Blah, blah, blah. There's no coverage for mental health care costs under Canadian single payer, so it sounds like Obamacare is actually ahead in that respect. Yeah, it's ahead in that respect. I only wish that we had a public option. You know, that's the one thing that Canada has above us, that really stands above. Police are the wrong people to be dealing with these issues, but at the same time, I understand the physical risks that these situations can entail and why they send police. It's true. The thing is that most incidents that police respond to are not violent, right? Or even dangerous. And in fact, there's quite a bit of evidence to indicate that situations become dangerous or violent because of police presence. Because imagine that you're having a mental breakdown, or you're really out of it, or you're delusional, and then the police show up, right? Now you're going to react very differently to that person than you would to a social worker, for example. I've had 7 providers in 3 years leaving the agency and getting assigned to a new caseload every time. Jeez, that's bad luck. and that's a lot of providers in a short amount of time. That makes me think that maybe they're not getting paid as much as they should. Let's see. Yep. Oh, Dan, you already talked about what I was saying. Yeah, they can escalate the situation. It's a frustrating paradox for sure. Mental health has become a trend for people to say that it's something you should prioritize, but stigmatize visible factors of mental health. Yeah, totally. Right. People are fine, I think, with oh, you have depression or anxiety or OCD. Like, okay, we can, that's normal. Yeah, like let's destigmatize that. Oh, you have hallucinations or delusions, or you have outbursts in public. We can't be having that, right? That's still very much stigmatized, I think. There's obviously a lot to consider, but please look into the recent discovery highlighted on NPR regarding schizophrenia and COVID. Okay, I'll check it out. Let me make a note for myself so that I don't forget. NPR. Well, actually, let me just see if I can find this. NPR COVID schizophrenia. Is this kind of what you're talking about? Is this a story? Let's see the audio. What is it? This one? Here we go. Interesting. All right, I'm gonna save that for later. Okay. Let's see. I don't know much about it, but I live in a city that hosts a state prison hospital for the most violent offenders, famous people there. Yeah, there are still some prison hospitals. I guess I should clarify that, like, not all asylums, if you want to call them that, or mental hospitals have closed, but a vast majority have, right? We're talking like 90, 95% closed. Let's see. Mandate? No, not mandate. Ritual dosing, checkboxes. All the money, the bills for care are exorbitant. That is true. But at the same time, the bills for, like, this is the thing, right? Here's my take on it. The people who are in that revolving door of being on the street, having an episode, being brought to prison or jail, and then being released back onto the street, and then, rinse and repeat, right? The cost of jails or a hospital stay is huge. And these are people who typically don't have insurance. And so the cost ends up being hoisted onto, you guessed it, taxpayers. And so taxpayer money can either go towards providing people with 72-hour hospital stays, a few times a month, or, many, many times a year, or people being put in jail because they have mental health issues, or it can go towards actual care that might have low recidivism, right? Or that might actually help people live more fulfilling lives. So I think that's where I come down on it. Let's see. Paying my social worker $12 an hour. Oh God, $12 an hour. Jesus. One barrier that I could see. Oh, Allie's here. One barrier that I could see that could be a major reason to reopen is that we already struggle to fund needed resources facilities like long-term care facilities. True. Although I would say that that's where all of the money went when the deinstitutionalization movement happened. It all went towards stuff like long-term facilities, towards community mental health services, and that's not a bad thing. But I think we can have both, right? We can fund the long-term care facilities and also these other programs, or find a balance where long-term care facilities are able to, I guess, work with the funds that they have. Maybe we don't need as many of them if we have some of these other places that are open, but like these type of facilities could be really great if they have enough resources, staff, funding to provide adequate care for the residents. Exactly. Yeah, agreed. Because if we don't have enough money to pay for it, then that opens up to abuse potential. I agree, and maybe I'm ignorant in the finances. Does $35,000 a month seem reasonable? That does not seem reasonable. That seems like a lot of money. But what do I know? Maybe it is that much. The lawyers I know who work in mental health law and prison law are usually arguing from the same principles. Yeah, exactly. You got, it would save money to have this kind of stuff. I think people are apprehensive anyway to mental health care due to the stigma, and allowing the government to tunnel more funding would open more people up to the idea of therapy. Potentially, than those who'd be opposed because of the lack of autonomy. Wait, I think people are apprehensive anyway to mental health care due to the stigma, and allowing for government to tunnel more funding would open more people. Yeah, right. If you put more funding towards mental health care, it could destigmatize mental health care generally. Although I think there's been a lot of destigmatizing happening in the last few years, which has been really great. All right, I'm gonna let Loki out because he's gonna keep whining otherwise. Come on, go. That cat. Hey, 123 Gamer Man, that's my brother. Happy to have you here. It costs less to house me with a federal program than to shelter, hospital, jail me. Very true. I was a very lucky one to get into a specific housing program, and it made the hugest difference, feeling safe. Absolutely. I actually worked for 2 of those programs. They were called ACT programs, Assertive Community Training programs, and the idea was it was a housing first model. And so anyone who entered into the program who needed housing was provided with housing. Just sort of carte blanche, right? They didn't pay for it. They had it available to them. And it made such a huge difference for those people to just have a home, right, to go to. And a lot of people who ended up being super successful, right, ended up actually, getting jobs and experiencing fewer mental health issues and just able to live their lives in a stable, happy way. So, let's see. It's good to hear your firsthand account of the program working for you. We all deserve to feel safe, especially after an ordeal like homelessness. Absolutely, I agree. All right, let's go back to this video and keep watching.
And bioethicists have proposed bring back the psychiatric hospital.
In the old days, we had mental institutions, and you could nab somebody like this because, they did. They knew something was off.
The parents of mentally ill patients are among the most vocal advocates.
They shut down all the hospitals because, we have all these medicines now, and everybody can be in recovery. Well, the unfortunate fact is not everybody recovers. So where do they go?
All right, they're going to probably expand on this a little bit more as they keep going. Another reason for reopening, and they'll probably talk about this more, but it reduces the burden of care on families, right? This is actually a really unfortunate part of this whole situation, is that because oftentimes the community mental health services that are available aren't enough, the burden of care ends up being passed on to families. The families have a decision to make. Either they can care for their mentally ill child. Usually these are parents who end up taking care of their kids. They can take care of their child, or they can let their child live on the street or be hospitalized for 3 days. And that seems like such a stupid and difficult decision to put in the hands of families, right? To say like, yeah, your kid attacked you in the middle of the night, and that really sucks. So you can either call the police and have them hauled off, and they can go to jail, or I guess it's kind of your job, right? You figure it out. So that's a really sucky situation to be in.
What do they do?
So is it time to bring back the asylum? And why did it disappear in the first place?
My contention is that there is no mental illness, and there can be no mental illness.
In the mid-20th century, the libertarian psychiatrist Thomas Szasz first articulated a theory that would rock the profession and define his career, that the whole concept of mental illness was a fraud.
Thomas Szasz was a psychiatrist who didn't really believe in psychiatry. Having a book by him on your shelf is enough to start an argument.
Jacob Sullum interviewed Szasz for Reason magazine in 2000 and cites him as a major influence on his own work.
He argued what people call mental illness is not a literal disease, but a metaphorical disease. What he called problems in living, internal conflicts, conflicts with yourself, conflict with other people.
You could ask people to define mental illness, and no one could. One can only give examples of it, like...
All right, so this guy's a jerk. Like, this guy clearly is, like they were saying, a psychiatrist who doesn't believe in psychiatry. This is the kind of person who, who would tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yes, yesterday's dead, today only exists. This is indeed live. You are with us here and now. While I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna put up a poll. There we go. And apologies to the Twitch people. I know what I'm asking is, should we reopen mental institutions? Yes or no? Feel free to participate in the chat. Maybe if I can get to partner status, then I'll be able to do polls eventually. But feel free to put in your vote. Let's see. What about specialized, well-made, tiny home villages that provide counseling on the grounds, room for outdoor picnics, and community gardens? Yeah, so this is kind of the idea behind the program that I was a part of, although it wasn't necessarily like a separate thing. It was just part of the community, and it works, right, to a degree for many people, but not all. And so I think you have to think about like levels of care. And so I think what you're proposing, Liz, is really great and could be really helpful and effective, but it's not going to work for everyone in the same way that, I'm trying to think of like an analog, in the same way that like, you might have an assisted living facility for people who are older, but that may not be the best place for someone with Alzheimer's, right? They may need more care. And so what do you do in that situation, right? You have this really great community of people who have their own apartments and stuff, but there are some people who need more than that. So that's hard. Dignity for a patient always in every interaction. Somehow it is a pipe dream. I mean, it should be the bare minimum, you would think, right? Dignity for everyone. It just sucks that anytime you have room for abuse to happen, it seems to happen. Who's going to pay all the researchers to study how the institutions are doing and make improvements based on evidence? Government officials. The government. I'm sure they would love to collect data on that. In fact, I think you could even create a pipeline from from graduate programs to these kinds of places, right? To have PhD postdocs conduct research while working at these various places, right? And then propose improvements that then could be used to benefit patients. The emergency mental health ward in my small town shut down due to lack of staffing. The hospital claimed there are not enough psychiatrists. That actually probably is true. It's hard to attract psychiatrists to more rural areas. And so if you're in a smaller town, you have to think about it from a psychiatrist perspective, right? They make they can make a lot of money, and if you're in a small area where maybe you don't have as much demand for psychiatric services, then maybe because of less demand, there's just less income. So I know that has been a big issue. I used to work for a program, and they were talking about how they were trying to attract a psychiatrist. They were trying to get any psychiatrist, right? They were trying to get a psychiatrist to go to Fresno, which you think of Fresno and you're like, that seems like kind of a bigger place. It's not a small town. And in order to get somebody to go there, because it's not a particularly desirable place to live, in order to get a psychiatrist to move to that location and to provide care there, they were offering a salary of $600,000 starting. So if that tells you anything, it makes me think maybe I should have gone to medical school. Let's see. Privacy or room for socializing, it's humanizing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that will be important regardless of whatever ends up happening. I think institutions, what you don't want to have happen with institutions is for them to become the source of what we call institutional trauma, right? The same way that it can happen with prisons, jails, long-term facilities where people are held. That can be, if they're uncomfortable, if they are not humanizing, if people aren't treated with dignity and respect, it can become a source of trauma for that person. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. I have a vision of the future where you can upload your blood test results to some service and get prescription/medical services online. Do you see something similar in regards to mental health? No. Not anytime soon. Maybe like 500 years from now. But we know so little about the brain and how wiring works and all that stuff, in the same way that we're pretty far away from like doing a blood test result and getting, all of this information. That sounds very much like Theranos, by the way, which is kind of funny. But it's like that times 1,000 for mental health, I think, because it's just so complex. If psychiatrists are in short supply, could changing the funding of institutions help? Is the problem that we are not admitting enough students to medical programs and not offering enough residencies? I am not the expert to talk to about like what this looks like. My understanding is that there is a shortage of psychiatrists. I don't particularly know why. Part of the issue is that you have medical students, like all psychiatrists come from medical school, and medical students can choose their specialization. And so maybe there are just not as many students going into psychiatry as that specialization, but I actually am not sure. I should ask my doctor friend and see if she might have some insight into that. Getting physicians to move to smaller communities is no better under socialized healthcare, unfortunately. Potentially, yeah. I wonder, if you could essentially supplement income, so in order to attract people to those locations, if the need is present. Part of the issue is like if you're serving a smaller community, then the need is less, just by numbers. But as you say, yes, socialized healthcare is still way better. Imaginator, yes, reopen them despite the drawbacks and inefficiencies that provide so much needed care for those who are otherwise unable to care for themselves. Yeah, I think that's my general takeaway as well. I think the question will become obviously like, how do you address those drawbacks and inefficiencies so that everyone is comfortable? First and foremost, the patients, but then of course, getting people on board with that, getting people to vote for something like that, or getting legislators to agree to something like that. There's a lot of stigma around mental institutions, I think. La, 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 la. Oh my gosh, G-Person, I'm so sorry about your experience. That sounds really just terrifying and horrible. Yeah, this is also an issue. I mean, I'm not sure if your partner was abusive because of their mental health issues, or if it was just because they were an asshole, or maybe both. But this is a big issue for domestic violence cases as well. It's really a horror how like the police are sort of the catch-all for responding to a lot of these issues, and there's sadly just not very much follow-up to a lot of these concerns. A psychiatry provider is one of the ones I mentioned who moved to private practice and dumped off for Medicaid patients. Yeah, that'll happen. I mean, people make decisions to start their own thing, and if they're at an institution and then decide to strike out and make their own business, that's not much you can do about that. I believe doctors are assigned the residency by an algorithm. There are limited positions for each specialty, and students can say which they prefer, but the algorithm ultimately decides. Yeah, I'll trust you on that. I don't know enough to contradict that, and I think you're correct. I wonder how much power they have over their specialty, because I think they do choose their specialty, and then the algorithm decides residency within that specialty. I think could be wrong. Now students might be able to choose multiple specialties that they're interested in, but I don't know. All right, let's keep watching.
Homosexuality, which the American Psychiatric Association voted, that it's no longer a disease, it's only a disease if you don't like it.
At the time that Zaz was writing, lots of people were locked up who posed no danger to other people and possibly not even dangerous to themselves in any way, and might be subjected to what today look like horrifying treatments, but at the time were considered to be the height of science.
Here the skull is thin enough to transmit light, and it can usually be perforated easily with a sharp instrument without damage to any important structures.
But the man who discovered lobotomy and got the Nobel Prize did it on people who didn't want to be lobotomized. Tens of thousands of Americans were subjected to lobotomy. Did they want to be lobotomized?
Lobotomy. If you take a sharp object and stick it up through somebody's eye socket and jiggle it around in their brain,
Whoa.
this person...
All right. Sorry about that, folks. Wasn't expecting to actually see a lobotomy happening. So that kind of goes along with what we were saying before. Reasons not to reopen, unsafe practices, or let's add unethical. But obviously, it's worth noting that at the time, some of these practices were pretty standard. They weren't seen as horrific in the wider population during that time. Lobotomies, over-medicating, electroshock therapy were not seen as horrific the way they are now. Wow, electroshock therapy actually isn't really seen as horrific these days. But Let's keep watching.
Person who used to be troublesome and disruptive will calm down often. Maybe what you end up with somebody who now is less troublesome to other people, but is impaired for the rest of his life. And you look back and you think, how could that have happened? Like, how did they think that that was a legitimate medical treatment? That was the context.
Saz helped to inspire the deinstitutionalization movement that started in the 1950s and hit its stride in the 60s.
All right. Now we're getting to why mental institutions were closed in the first place. Why were they closed? Deinstitutionalization movement started in 1950s, got big in 1960s. Great.
The time has come for a great national effort. Nearly half of the 530,000 persons in our state mental hospitals are in institutions with over 3,000 patients, getting little or no individual treatment. Many of these institutions have less than half of the professional staff required. 45% of them have been hospitalized for 10 years or more. If we launch a broad new health program now, it will be possible within a decade to reduce the number of patients now under custodial care by up to 50%.
Mental hospitals started emptying out and closing down, but critics say deinstitutionalization was a disaster.
All right. So, Kennedy was a big proponent. I sort of wonder if it's in part because of his sister, who was lobotomized, if he thought that this might be helpful for people to actually have them out in the community. It's kind of funny, though, because his sister was sort of tucked away and not talked about all that much because it was sort of seen as like this political risk for him at the time. But anyway, so part of the reason why they were closed, the deinstitutionalization movement, 50s and 60s, they were seen as horrific places, in part, and they'll probably talk about this later on, in part because of one flew over. Wait. Is that how you spell cuckoo? I think so. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If you haven't seen the movie, great movie. Jack Nicholson. Good movie. I haven't read the book, but the book, I think, came out in the 50s or 60s, probably the 60s. And it really pushed the conversation about how, like, horrible and atrocious these places were. So, anyway. Let's see. Do you think psychologists should have the option to take continuing education pharmacological and medical courses to allow them to prescribe to fill the psychiatrist void? So that is happening in some states. I think there's like 6 of them now. States where psychologists can prescribe. Illinois joined New Mexico and Louisiana. It's only 3, actually. So some states are starting to do this, where they're allowing psychologists to prescribe specifically for that reason. I think part of the reason why we don't see that more is because people in psychiatry are protective of their field, right? And obviously don't want just anybody to be able to prescribe. Or even doctors too. You could probably get a lot of support from doctors who would be very much against that. So, but anyway, there is exactly that, where some psychologists in certain states can prescribe. Yeah, so authentic. Part part of the reason why turnover is so bad for people who are paid by Medicaid is because Medicaid rates are extremely low. And I know that that's not your fault, right? This is a governmental issue, kind of like what we've been talking about, where because the rates are not competitive, you end up having people making the really hard decision to probably leave something that they enjoy, working with people who they want to keep working with, but there's no opportunity for growth, right? There's no opportunity to make a living wage, right? If you have, like, let's say you're running a practice and you have to pay rent and you have to pay for admin services or whatever, and then you get a bunch of Medicaid patients where the rate is $75 an hour. If that was all profit, that would be great. But it's not. You know, you're having to pay for all this overhead as well. And so you end up making significantly less. And so people end up looking at that and saying, you know, there's greener pastures elsewhere. Maybe I can go somewhere else. Or just treat patients with Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example. And they end up doing that instead. So it's really sad because obviously people with Medicaid are often the people who are on the lower socioeconomic status side of things, or people who have lost their job, or people who, you know, are like typically people who are receiving like government aid, that kind of thing. So anyway, it's very frustrating. Oh, so Dan, electroconvulsive therapy is still used today? It is still used today. Yes, it's used quite frequently for severe depression issues. Oh, and I see my brother already answered that question. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of systemic issues. How to make an institution even work within all that exists badly now. True. Oh, YouTube video, thanks so much for joining. Hope you come back. We'll see you later on. Imaginator, I'm glad that you're liking the conversation. It's bad, yes, but it's good to know that it's bad and the answers are not that complicated. Give poor people homes, food, healthcare, money. Give those things to anyone who wants them. Yeah, I agree. What's this for? We're researching a video. I'm going to make a video about essentially proposing that we reopen mental health institutions. And so I'm doing a little bit of research, trying to figure out all the reasons for it, reasons against it, kind of educating myself, getting some initial data down. So let's get back to the video that we were watching.
Dumping thousands of mental patients onto the streets with no plan. Even Saz criticized the way deinstitutionalization unfolded.
He thought it sort of doubled the injustice that those people were not offered the choice to stay. This is their home they're being thrown out of now. So he thought that was wrong.
The number of psychiatric hospital beds available dropped by 95% between 1955 and 2005, according.
Okay, let's just get that stat here. Statistics. Mental institution beds dropped 95% from 65 to 2005. I need to look up the source on that.
Psychiatric hospital beds available dropped by 95% between 1955 and
55. And it was just psychiatric hospitals, so psychiatric hospital beds. So that's even including the psychiatric hospital beds that you have in hospitals. So imagine that 95% decrease. That's huge. My MD told me that shock is highly effective. My MD is not always right, though they are H. Very enthusiastic. Okay. Yeah, it is highly effective. I've seen people who have gone through it who have been suffering from serious, major depressive disorder, severe major depressive disorder, or people who have major dysthymia. We don't know exactly how it works. The guess is that it just kind of jumbles up your brain a little bit. And by sending electrical current through your neurons, it opens up the potential to create new neural connections that may allow for different ways of thinking that aren't in the normal sort of depressed route. Tired of paying the government to blow things up or help other people blow things up. It has done only the opposite of good. I disagree with you, G person. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of flaws with the government and government spending. But I think it's an overall positive, an overall benefit. And I think we often take for granted a lot of the things that the government, that governments, not just talking about like the American government, but just governments in general, provide to society in terms of structure, in terms of funding, in terms of, providing services and goods that we don't even think about. I mean, just stuff as simple as like the roads that we drive on, right? Yeah, I think from my perspective, government is a net positive by quite a significant degree than a net negative. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't complain about things that are bad, right? I think that's always welcome, and we should continue to sort of point out the problems that come up, because that's the only way that we improve the system. It's kind of how they think psychedelics work, by jumbling up some of the pathways and allowing a reset. Exactly, Dan. That is precisely correct. Yeah, that's the same idea. You are activating different pathways, just like you might with the psychedelic, and allows for different ways of thinking, or a reset, as you put it. I had a note that I was going to put about, reasons for reopening. It would vastly decrease the homeless population, which would be great, right? Not that every homeless person is mentally ill, and not to say that we should just funnel all of our homeless into these kinds of institutions, because that's not necessarily needed. So this won't solve homelessness. But there are many people who are homeless who would have been the people who belonged in these kinds of institutions in the past. We'd finally have no more stupid horror movies about abandoned asylums. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, how can I fit that in here? Horror movies about abandoned asylums. Let's put that in its own section. We'll just call this random notes. Keep that in the back pocket. It would benefit a significant segment of homeless or at risk of. Yeah, exactly. That's my thought too. All right, back to the video.
And 2005, according to the Treatment Advocacy Center. Starting in 1960 as the mental...
Sorry, let me just real quick. Treatment Advocacy Center. Okay.
Health population in hospitals declined, the number of mentally ill people in jails and prisons shot up. A 2011 Supreme Court case filed against the California Bureau of Prisons revealed that some mentally ill inmates were held in telephone booth-sized solitary cells. Some reformers say it's time to cast aside Thomas Szasz and his attack on the mental health establishment.
I gotta say, Szasz has been totally disproven. It's kind of like believing the church's teachings on an earth-centered Egocentric universe.
DJ Jaffe first became aware of the enormous problems in America's mental health system after his sister-in-law was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it proved enormously challenging to get her the treatment she needed.
My sister-in-law thought that people across the street were talking about her. The FBI planted a transmitter in her head. There are a section of the mental health industry that believes being psychotic and delusional is a right to be protected rather than an illness to be treated. Being psychotic and delusional is not an exercise of free will, it's the inability to exercise free will. And medications can free people from the bastille of their psychosis and enable them to engage in society.
Jaffe says,
so this is a really interesting component of a lot of these mental illnesses that we're talking about is this idea that he's kind of bringing up, right? Which is there, and it sort of applies to some of the concerns, some of the reasons for not reopening, right? There's concerns about loss of autonomy, right? That's a big one. What he's kind of saying is by putting people into institutions that would provide care that might alleviate some of these mental health issues that they're going through, you're not forcing someone into changing themselves in a way that they don't want to be changed, that kind of thing. What you are doing is you are relieving what are classified as like ego dystonic symptoms. So very briefly, generally you can fit symptoms into being ego dystonic or ego syntonic. If they are ego syntonic, then that means they are consistent with your personality or with how you view yourself. So for example, someone who, let me think about this. Someone who has bipolar disorder, when they are manic, they often experience symptoms that are ego syntonic. It feels like an enhancement of themselves, right? It feels like they are an accentuated version of themselves. And as such, there's actually less desire to change, that part of yourself. There's less desire to take medications. There's less desire to follow directions from others, versus ego dystonic, where it feels in contrast with your personality, in contrast with how you want to be living your life, right? Someone who experiences paranoia and hallucinations doesn't want that, right? That is very disturbing and feels like something outside of themselves. Same thing with like someone with OCD, for example. They might have these delusions, or rather these obsessions that seem very much outside of themselves, right? These obsessions about like poisoning someone, for example, these things that they would never do. And so what this guy is saying is like, if we are helping people be alleviated from these ego dystonic symptoms, then you're providing something really good for people, rather than like forcing them into a situation that is hurting them, or that, I guess, feels like you are changing them because it's bad for society, but not necessarily bad for the person. And what he's saying is like, no, it's bad for the person too, and like, they would want to change this as well. I hope that makes sense. Do I have a stream schedule? Anakin Luke, are you a Star Wars fan? I don't have a stream schedule. My stream schedule is whenever I feel like it. I wish that I had a stream schedule. I wish I could be that sort of dedicated. But the truth is, things are kind of weird. Things happen kind of whenever there's time. Maybe someday I'll have more of a stream schedule at some point. But for right now, no. Right now, I'm thinking once a week, maybe. Something like that. I mean, this is the second time this week, so I'm getting in there.
That Saz did offer a valid critique of overreach and overdiagnosis in the mental health industry.
There are pieces of these anti-psychiatrists which are true. When you talk about somebody with mild depression, mild ADHD, is it so abnormal as to be classified as a disorder? And we are certainly overdiagnosing and medicalizing that group.
People have gotten the sense that he had a good critique at the time, but it's sort of outmoded. It really isn't outmoded. I mean, if anything, the territory claimed by psychiatry is expanding more and more. Look at all the other things that are covered by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is the psychiatric Bible, right?
But when it comes to the 4% of the population that the National Institute of Mental Health characterizes as having a serious mental illness, Jaffe says healthcare professionals need far more power to involuntarily commit patients to dedicated treatment centers.
So that's an interesting part there. We can potentially, maybe we'll explore that. Maybe that should be a separate video. Oh, Anakin, Luke, thanks for joining. Glad that you could hang out. Hope you have a good night. Biggest issue I find with reopening is that our infrastructure currently in our public inpatient facilities is already overwhelmed, not just from numbers, but from lack of funding awareness and training. Funding, awareness, and training. Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree. I think, though, the support then is for increasing funding to a point where it would be where you'd be providing services that are going to help people, like where that will be less of an issue, right? You need to actually back this up with numbers, with actual dollars, and not just say like, well, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Let's open these institutions and use the money that we already have. So I think part of the reason why these inpatient facilities are overwhelmed is because we just don't have enough of them. And then, same thing with awareness, training, that sort of thing. If we have more of these kinds of institutions, then there would be an entire infrastructure built around the infrastructure for, giving training on how to work in these kinds of places, providing funding for these services, helping people, I guess, be able to go into the system, go into these institutions, so that other facilities are not so overwhelmed. Once a week, but not for long. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're gonna have a baby soon, so probably not gonna be streaming in May. I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe I'll want to escape and I'll get a day or an evening, a few hours. Not enough available beds. Yeah, there aren't enough available beds right now. So available beds tends to correlate with staffing, right? So you need to, license-wise, you need to have a certain number of staff per beds. And so oftentimes when someone says, oh, we don't have, an open bed, what that really means is we don't have enough staff to like open up these other beds. But also you can have just an entirely full facility. And I've encountered that before, where I've had someone who really needed a higher level of care and there just wasn't anything available because they were completely full. So yet another argument for having something like this. Let me actually add that here. existing psychiatric inpatient institutions are already overbooked, overwhelmed. Something like that. I'm sadly rather pessimistic coming from Alabama. There's one public institution for the whole north of the state with less than 40 beds per age bracket. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty normal for the United States right now. There's just not that many places open, although 40 beds per age bracket for the entire north of the state, that's pretty slim pickings. All right.
The civil commitment law is not good enough. It basically requires someone to become danger to self or others. We should prevent people from becoming danger to self or others, not require them to become danger to self or others.
Jeff.
That's a sticky situation, right? I get what this guy is saying, which is we need to be able to provide services to people with severe mental health issues before they become a danger to themselves or others, so that they're getting the care that they need. The problem that I have, I guess, is this is sort of like the Captain America, Iron Man debate, right? Where it's like you want to institutionalize someone before they reach a level that may require institutionalization, right? So the question becomes where do you draw the line? And I think that that's a very touchy question. Yeah, Tim, yeah. Obviously has not watched Moon Knight. I mean, come on. This whole, how do you judge someone and their character? Yeah, that is a slippery slope, as we might say. Look at something like Britney Spears, right? Where she was conserved, right? Was put under conservatorship and put under the care of her father. And a lot of people got really up in arms and frustrated about that because they thought, from their kind of outside perspective, okay, Britney seems like she can, she's performing. She seems like she's kind of taking care of herself. She's paying the dancers and other people that are, performing with her. She seems like a functional adult. Free her from this conservatorship. And I can't really speak to it because I just don't know the circumstances of how she got put on it in the first place and how she's doing currently, right? I haven't spoken with her. I have no inside knowledge. And so it's really hard in those situations because people can go from being quite functional to then being in a totally different state. And so based on this guy's reasoning, Britney Spears might be locked up in an institution, right? And not have the opportunity to leave. And people might take issue with that. And I think that's a reasonable concern to have, is sort of figuring out, okay, when do these institutions come into play, essentially?
He also advocates for a policy called assisted outpatient treatment. New York passed Kendra's Law in November 1999 after Goldstein's murder of Kendra Webdale. It allows a judge to order outpatient treatment for anyone with a psychiatric diagnosis who's recently been jailed or hospitalized as a result of going untreated and who the court determines will likely deteriorate further without intervention.
And I would suggest that it is a libertarian's dream. It has lowered rates of homelessness, arrest, incarceration, needless hospitalization in the 70% range for the most seriously mentally ill. And from a libertarian perspective, they maintain more of their freedoms than the alternatives, which are inpatient commitment or incarceration. This idea that we should just abandon the seriously mentally ill who don't recognize their need for treatment serves neither the liberty interest of the individual, the financial interest of society, or the interests of trying to keep the public safe.
So, I just saw Miss Foxglove. Thanks for your comment. Yeah, so psychiatric wards have always existed, but they're not the same. Psychiatric wards in hospitals, right, have limited capacity. Often, oftentimes it's like 30 to 40 beds, if that, per hospital, and it's not long-term care, right? So we're not talking about months and months where someone is staying in a psychiatric ward. It's a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks max, right? And then the hospital wants you out. Psychiatric hospitals that we're talking about, these mental institutions, are more long-term care that would be able to provide services for longer periods of time. Anytime the court is determining someone's psychological care, then you know your system has already failed. Perhaps. I don't know if I agree with that totally. I think I don't have a firm opinion on it. I'm going to keep going.
When you're trying to get help for someone, especially for Misty, who didn't feel like she needed help, it's very, very difficult.
Linda Mayo, who lives in Modesto, California, has been advocating for the enactment of Laura's Law in her home county. She's the mother of twin daughters, both with severe mental illnesses, and it's through their experiences that she became an advocate for strengthening the involuntary commitment and compulsory treatment laws.
It's not a panacea. It's not going to help everyone. But the people who refuse treatment and consistently refuse treatment, and who are in and out of the hospital, in and out of jail, homeless, suicidal, it can help them.
Mayo believes that the legal obstacle.
So that's good. She's recognizing, like, this isn't a cure-all. It's not like once you open institutions, it's going to solve all of society's problems. That's not really the goal with it. It's not a place where you just dump everybody. It's really meant to target a specific population for people who really need care, who do not seek it, or who cannot access it consistently when left on their own, essentially.
Obstacles to involuntary commitment could have cost her daughter her life. One day 5 years ago, Misty, who was 38 and has schizoaffective disorder, vanished. Mayo discovered that after collecting her $200 paycheck, she had boarded a bus to Los Angeles.
I was frantic. She was in a big city that she was unfamiliar with, and we had no family or friends there. Very little money. I thought $200, that's going to go fast. She had already been sleeping in the parks here before she left and roaming the streets. So I thought in LA, it scared me more.
Another week and a half went by. Finally, the phone rang. It was LAPD.
She was in a neighborhood and sitting on a cliff, and the neighbors were concerned about her.
In Mayo's view, Misty posed a threat not only to herself, but to others as well. Mayo later found out that during the time she was missing, Misty had been arrested in a shopping mall.
I can't tell you what was going through her head, but she was trying to take a baby out of a baby carriage. And the mother said no, and Misty didn't heed that. So she was arrested.
For years, Misty had been refusing therapy and medication. After her arrest, the state had legal grounds for forcing her to comply with treatment. Linda believes this saved Misty's life.
I was very...
So obviously we're getting a firsthand account from this mom talking about the mental health issues of her child, and right, this is a 30-something-year-old woman, right? But the struggles that she's going through with getting care for her. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from other families that sound exactly like this, right? Where it's just like the ups and downs and the worry and anxiety about like having your family member out somewhere and not knowing if they're safe or not. So Tim, I disagree. Actually, the court's only mechanism for enforcement is not force. The court actually can do a much better job of getting people help who really need it, in a way that police cannot. But typically, the court, when mental health is a concern, right? If that is identified and people are able to kind of see it and that sort of thing, the court does have other tools, other options available to it that don't involve jail or prison. Part of the issue is with being informed of that, I think, and knowing when that is a concern. I think that's perhaps the bigger issue, is like having people who are advocating for people with mental illnesses in the court system, but also having judges who are more aware of mental health issues, having just a system in general that's more aware of mental health issues. And I think typically, when police are getting involved, it tends to end up being about the police officer's experience, and I think that can skew what ends up happening with that individual, right? That's why a lot of these folks end up in jail or prison, is because they're seen as a threat. But that said, the court can determine someone's psychological care, can give them services that they need. There are people who have received the care that they need because of court action. So, okay. All right, let's keep listening to the story.
Happy that she was being allowed to be in the hospital for a longer period of time that would require some stabilization.
Laura's Law, in her view, creates a legal path to giving seriously mentally ill patients like Misty the help they need before they pose a danger to themselves or others.
This is one step saying, okay, we want to catch you in a court order before it's a crime, before it's a hospitalization, before it's homelessness.
But some mental health advocates say that Laura's Law and similar bills violate the rights of even seriously mentally ill patients.
There's a big perception in my community that once they get their claws on you, just like law enforcement, they're not letting you go if they can help it.
Richard Krzyzanowski, who himself has suffered from severe depression, is a patients' rights advocate who has worked for LA County representing mentally ill individuals committed against their will.
Some of the most disempowering and dangerous words anyone can say is, we're doing this for your own good. We're here to help you. But if I'm not asking for help...
When you see somebody walking down the street screaming, "I am the Messiah," it's not because they think they're the Messiah. They know they're the Messiah. They are unaware that they are ill, and we should be delivering treatment to them.
But Krzyzanowski says that mental health professionals and reformers often abuse the concept of too sick to know you're sick to violate the rights of the mentally ill.
It's a way of saying, I don't have to listen to you, or more to the point, you're now voiceless.
The whole involuntary treatment is a hard balance. No one wants involuntary. All the advocates that I've talked to, this is the last thing that we want. But there are cases that require it.
And Krzyzanowski says that even though the state institutions are gone, to this day, many psychiatric patients are locked in facilities for weeks or even months at a time, under court orders giving legal power over financial and healthcare decisions to a third party under an arrangement called conservatorship.
So I kind of agree with that woman's assessment, right? Which is involuntary mental health services are not the desired outcome, right? That is not something that is wanted, right? Preferably, that would not be necessary. But sometimes there are people who really need that care, who are not going to seek it themselves. And that becomes really hard to square that, right? How do you balance taking care of someone while not imposing your like personal beliefs of like what is acceptable, right, and versus what is not. And I think it really comes down to the safety and well-being of that person and of others. If they're not willing to get help, they're a threat to society, posing a hazard to the public. Again, I think it really depends on the situation there. You know, like there are plenty of people who are not. Wait, Jeffrey, you're just telling me this now? I thought I saved this. So this whole time, Jeffrey, I've had my Twitch stream labeled as I'm working on a bonsai. That's nuts. All right, well, I'm not, if you haven't noticed. We're talking about mental asylums. But no, going back to what you were saying, Miss Foxglove, not everyone is a threat to society, and I think sometimes people are they feel scared by something that they don't quite understand, and that doesn't mean that the person is a threat. It may mean that they're just having it may just mean that you're uncomfortable, right? If someone is on the street and they're talking to themselves, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are like going to hurt someone, right? So I think it really comes down to when someone needs help and are not able to access it themselves, and there is a danger to self or others. Yeah, I think that kind of is where it comes down to. And we're not necessarily specifically talking about homicide and suicide, but more, well-being of the individual too, right? That can be like someone who is walking out in traffic, but not because they're really trying to hurt themselves. They're just like not in their right mind, Where's the line that defines when a person is really up to decide by themselves? Yeah, that is the huge question. That is the big question. And I don't think there's an easy answer to that. And I think I think it could be a moving target. Not because anything particularly changes, but more our understanding of mental health and our understanding of what needs care versus not, or what deserves involuntary care versus not, will change over time, potentially. The underlying problem is that the institutional intervention occurs long after the person reached a point where they started to need help and could have recognized it, or others could have intervened. Yeah, I mean, this is part of the hope, is that people can receive care earlier through community services, right? Receive what they need and potentially avoid getting to a point where involuntary services are required. That's just not going to happen 100% of the time, though, I think, right? Because it requires a lot of care by parents and communities and other institutions to prioritize that and care for each individual to the degree that, that mental health doesn't rise to that level. And frankly, there are genetic factors at play that may not, that may override those environmental factors that might be preventative normally. Mental health resources should be more accessible to help bring awareness to the population, to help boost funding that would improve the function of the institutions, including more beds, more staff. Yeah, I agree. That would be awesome. That'd be wonderful. Seems like a big gray area. It is, yeah, huge gray area, figuring out where that line is. The behaviors that attract the law enforcement system are essentially indistinguishable in terms of effect from voluntary acts. The police system isn't designed to make those distinctions. I disagree. I think there are some situations that are indistinguishable, right? Someone breaks into a home, for example. You may not be able to determine that it is instigated by a mental health issue, but the frank truth is that what we're focusing on is situations where there are calls that are identified as mental health situations, right? Somebody walking out in traffic, somebody yelling to themselves, somebody who is, like causing a scene in a restaurant because they're just not in the right mind. Those are fairly often distinguished, right, as mental health situations, and not like acts of crime. So I think even with the police training that we have in place, it's not sufficient for addressing those. And frankly, the police should not be put in charge of addressing those mental health concerns in the first place. They're just not. They don't have the degree of training that's needed to improve, well, to properly address and de-escalate mental health situations like that. So that's my 2 cents at least. All right.
The most difficult calls we would get, especially during anybody's holiday season, would be people who are on conservatorship, were locked away somewhere. They were able to get a phone call, and you just felt like you were talking to one person alone, like they'd been locked away in a dungeon and hadn't seen the light for like months.
Another problem with the idea of bringing back state mental hospitals is...
Thanks for the follow, Game is Hard. Appreciate that.
is that in the current
Twitch
system, commitment often exacerbates symptoms. A study published in the medical journal Psychiatric Services found...
Okay, let's write this down. Reasons to not reopen. Commitment in psychiatric institutions increases symptoms.
That alarmingly high numbers of patients admitted to one state-run mental health system witnessed traumatic events, were secluded or restrained, and even suffered physical assault.
Okay, so that kind of goes along with our history of abuse, blah, blah, blah. Increased traumatic, increased exposure to traumatic events, and what else am I thinking? Well, let's just leave it at that. Like assault, what else do they list? seclusion, restraint, takedowns. What was the other thing? Handcuffs. Okay. Yeah, this part that they're talking about, this is kind of what I was talking about when I was discussing the idea of institutionalized trauma. These are the kinds of events that are more likely to happen in an institution that would result in experiencing trauma. So seclusion, assault, restraint, takedowns, being handcuffed. These are sort of the result of having a very like what's the word that I'm looking for? Your like stereotypical institution setting. So let's see here. Actually, some police are being trained into squads for responding to mental health emergencies who are skilled in mental health and de-escalation skills. So, Ms. Foxglove, watch my video. Here. Here we go.
Thanks to Curious.
I have a whole video, a 30-minute video about whether police should respond to mental health crises. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it over on Twitch too in case people want to watch it. Check it out. You're right. Some police are being trained in this stuff, and quite frankly, it's not enough. Not even close, right? We're talking about a 24, maybe 40 hours worth of training. 40 hours to respond to mental health crises versus somebody like me, right? And I've had, let's see. Well, I had to go to grad school. And so I had all of my classes there. And then I had to do 3,000 supervised hours in order to get fully licensed, in order to provide therapy. So the magnitude of difference, right, is huge. So it's not nearly enough. Let's see. They do have a list of signs that tell those who are skilled in determining this for the courts through psychiatric. I don't know what that's referring to necessarily. Glad you could join. Game is hard. Yeah, thanks for following. Did they just mention a study? Is that a study you can look up? Good question. Yeah,
we can change the
seems
whole
like it's,
historic.
This traumatic.
Patients report of traumatic or harmful experiences within the psychiatric setting. So let's actually, I'm going to save that. Oops. What was it again? Patients report of traumatic or harmful experiences within the psychiatric setting. Jeez. Experiences. Okay. Worth noting that these are patient reports, right? Which obviously, anytime you're using self-report data, you gotta kind of take it a little bit with a grain of salt, right?
Journal Psychiatric Services found that alarming
Historic dynamic of the use of coercion in people with serious mental illnesses.
Psychiatrist Scott Zeller is the founder of the Alameda Model, a movement dedicated to reforming how mental health institutions operate. It focuses on getting psychiatric patients out of hospital emergency rooms as quickly as possible and into dedicated mental facilities that respect their right to personal space and freedom, even if they've been involuntarily committed.
Typically, if you're in a psychiatric emergency, you're very paranoid, or you're very frightened, or you're very despondent, or you're very anxious. And imagine going into the general ER with those kind of symptoms and basically being put into a small space and said, you're going to have to stay here and you can't move. And people tend to get worse in ERs.
The Providence Medical Center in San Pedro, California, which uses Zeller's approach, is a standalone building just down the road from a hospital. Unlike in hospitals, which are often lacking in on-call psychiatrists, staff are able to medicate and stabilize patients around the clock, sometimes through the use of telepsychiatry if a doctor isn't on site, with the goal of discharging them for outpatient treatment within the first 24 hours of admission.
People can move about. Nobody's telling them, get back in that corner. What we find is the vast majority of the time, these folks are going to get better within 10, 15, 20 hours tops. And the idea that we were holding them for 3 days to send them to a hospital makes so little sense when you're thinking we could have had them home the same day. The average psychiatric emergency patient in a general medical ER.
So this is an interesting approach. I mean, this guy is talking about essentially, I like the model of obviously giving liberty, giving space, giving autonomy to the patient. I think that's really important and necessary. The piece that is kind of a little bit interesting is him talking about, you hold them for 10 hours or something, up to 24 hours, and then they're good to go. Then you can let them let them go, and they're totally fine. And I think it sort of ignores that revolving door that we see of people going back in the system. No doubt this guy has seen the same patient, the same client come through his doors multiple times, right? So it doesn't necessarily address the underlying issue.
It may be 25 to 50% of them will end up being physically restrained, leather restraints around wrists, ankles. In an empath unit, we're talking about far less than 1.
Yeah, I agree, Jeffrey. It does seem to be just to stabilize the immediate danger. So, like, if someone is having like a really serious suicidal event, right? 24 hours later, most likely they'll be fine, the next day, right? Or someone who is having a delusion, it might subside a little bit. But then that doesn't necessarily address the community strain that happens when there's a recurrence of symptoms, which is more often than not going to happen, right? People are put back out into the community and they're no better off than they were before, except they had a slightly better hospital experience, right? They had autonomy and that sort of thing. So I think we can take lessons from this, which is let's create services that are kind and open to people, and give them that autonomy. But let's also make sure that folks are getting the care that they need, the consistent care that they need. Imaginator, so glad you could be here. I hope that you have a good night.
1%. People respond very well to a supportive, interactive, nurturing environment, not so much to a coercive, cold environment. Go figure.
Is social deviation within the province of medicine.
Zeller says there's one lesson from Zaz that family...
True, yeah, Eros, the financial strain of being in and out of hospitals, because you got to imagine anytime a person is being involuntarily put into a hospital, it means that they were typically brought there by police. 90 whatever percent of the time they're being brought there by police. So you have a police call, you're using police resources to go essentially detain this person, bring them to a hospital. It's a lot of time being dedicated to that. And then hospitals are obviously extremely expensive, and that puts a lot of strain on the system just in general.
Family members of the seriously mentally ill should internalize. There's no level of coercion that can force some patients to conform with societal norms, as long as they don't pose a danger to themselves or others. In some cases, the best path forward is acceptance.
If somebody says, I want to live on a tent downtown, pretty much you have to let them. It's really, really difficult to determine when you should believe that they no longer have the right to decide for themselves. I think that we should be overly safe on the side of protecting individual rights.
I can't have pictures.
So this is the dichotomy, right? Where do you draw the line? There was that guy earlier that's like, we should put people into institutions before they even become a danger to others or before they commit crimes, right? And there's this guy who's like, we should err on the side of, preserving people's autonomy and letting them live how they want to live, even if it's not deemed socially acceptable. And that's the conflict, I think, there.
Pictures up in my house of when they were babies and junior high and high school and college. It's the shine, the light in their eyes that I miss. That sense of joy and fun and happiness is out of the eyes. And that makes me really sad.
There you go. All right, first video down. That was pretty good. That was a good video. Good synopsis. It doesn't necessarily dive into the history of deinstitutionalization as much as I thought it was going to. So that's definitely something that I want to get into a bit more, is like the reason why things are the way that they are today. And sort of the way that the image of mental institutions crumbled and deteriorated over time to the point where it is today. Why do you kind of look like the guy here? LOL. What are you talking about, Couch Potato? Which guy? Blah, blah, blah. Here comes the rights discourse. I mean, it's a legitimate discourse, right? To talk about, the rights of the individual. I mean, listen, I've worked with people who have told me that they want to essentially live out on the street, and they may have reasons for doing so. Just because it's not something that you would want to do doesn't mean that it's not a legitimate reason, right? And we can look at that and say that is fundamentally bad for you, right? Or bad for other people around you. But also we could say the same thing about like smoking cigarettes, and yet we still allow people to smoke them, even though it's bad for them and bad for the people around them. And so, I don't know. I mean, where do you draw the line, right? Is it like there is a legitimate argument to be made for like, should people be allowed to do things that are bad for them, or that are deemed unacceptable? For your, for society's benefit. This is sort of this is a common question that comes up with government, right? Which is like, when does the rights of the individual, when are the rights of the individual trumped by the rights or the needs of the populace? So I've worked with homeless people too, and when they say that is in the context of what they see around them as possible. Maybe, yeah. But I mean, yeah, I think the point still stands about, like, where do one person's rights end? YouTube video, could you please elaborate on the meaning of dichotomy? So dichotomy meaning the difference between two things, right? So the difference in this situation between the rights of an individual to make decisions for themselves versus the benefit of the many. Every person I've spoken to about their street involvement sees a tent or bench or bush or whatever as the only option that leaves them free to live their life the way they choose. Yeah, absolutely. And they may want that, right? They may see being involved in some sort of community program as something that takes away freedom from them, takes away that autonomy. Are they right? I mean, I'm not the judge of that. But I think this is worth having a debate about. It's worth having an argument about. So, anyway. All right. We watched the first video. There's plenty of other videos, although some of these are not that interesting. This might be good. This might be good. So this is a reporter issue. I'd like to dive into some articles and go more in depth on research too. I don't know what research looked like in terms of asylums back in the day, but that would be kind of interesting, as well as talking about people's really real experiences. Like this video would be really interesting, right? Someone being involuntarily put in a mental hospital when they were voluntarily seeking help. Yeah, I agree, but if they had free housing and a place to store their stuff, they would prefer that over a tent. Probably. Yeah. Right. Perhaps. I've also, in these programs that I worked at where it was a housing first model, some people still wouldn't, right? You would offer it to them and they would still say, no, I'm good. So it just depends. I'm gonna call it here. I would love to keep watching videos, but I think if I start watching something new, then it'll take me another hour to get through another video. So it's getting late here. So I think I will end up calling it, and we'll pick back up later on and keep going through. This video specifically won't come out for a little bit. So we'll probably have a video come out in May. Things are kind of up in the air right now, obviously, with Allie about to give birth. It means that we're going to have a little bit of time where things are sort of wonky, but we're still hoping to keep our normal schedule. So we'll probably have a video in May and then one in June. So this might go up in June. So that's the hope. Brandon, where were you earlier? I was talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Look, I even have it on my notes. Where is it? There it is. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. A little bit of time, yeah. I know. A lot of time. Blah, 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 blah. Research back in the day is probably really ethically corrupt and probably isn't replicable. I know. Well, I'd be curious. I don't know if they necessarily went into research trying to be corrupt, but it definitely would be a product of its day. It wouldn't be replicable, perhaps, just because we don't have similar kinds of settings now. But I would imagine the research from back in the day was probably more consistent with the stuff that you would see in psychiatry and psychology in the 50s, which was more like small sample or maybe even case studies rather than big data like we have today. We could get into the debate about what is ultimately right or wrong, or we could focus on making one step in the direction that is at least better than we are now. I believe the second one is more attainable. Yeah, I like that, Jeffrey. I think that's a really healthy approach to things, right? Is not to find the ultimate perfect answer, but rather to move in a direction that's going to help people and give them some services that they need. So anyway, all right, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I so appreciate. Oh, actually, no. Before I wrap it up, because I think that this is important. Real quick, throw out some ideas for titles for this video, because I want to put down something. So I'm trying to think of, okay, if you are on YouTube, right? And you are on your home page, right? Just kind of browsing. What title would draw you in where you're like, "Oh yeah, I gotta watch this." And I'm gonna put down some ideas that I have. So maybe like why some of these are going to be bad, okay? We just have to get the crap out of the way so that we can get to the good stuff. Why insane asylums are good, actually. That's a bad one. Reopening. What happened to the mental asylums? I think you meant mental, but I get you, Jeffrey. So here's the thing. Let me preface this. I want it to perhaps hint at the idea that that I am going to propose an argument for reopening these kinds of institutions, because I think that's the angle that I'm gonna take ultimately. Is that we should rethink our opinions on these kinds of institutions. That one trick about involuntary institutionalization they didn't want you to know. Yeah. Very good, Tim. Yeah. There's a channel called Recap Radio that has a bunch of old interviews with psychiatric patients that may have some interesting stuff for you. The disordered mind videos are fascinating. Later reading, viewing, listening. We got this NPR piece, and then Recap Radio, the disordered mind. I'll check it out, Dan. Appreciate that. What I'm gonna put it down, Jeffrey, because I'm gonna get rid of the though. What happened to mental asylums? Question mark. So that could be good. Can you refer to Mr. Beast in some way? Yeah. $10,000 if you can guess why. Refreshing asylums. Okay, now you're getting at something. Refreshing asylums. Refreshing asylums. Rethinking. Rethinking asylums. Something like that. Something maybe that. Something along those lines. Rethinking I'm gonna put it down, Jeffrey, just because. Asylums 2.0. Great. Wonderful. Because I appreciate the curiosity, the creativity, your contributions. The first option's pretty good, really? Why Insane Asylums are good, actually. Yeah. Yes, brainstorm. There are no stupid ideas. I worry that saying like Asylums 2.0 is, well, I don't know, maybe that's good. My ultimate goal as a YouTuber, by the way, I want to get to a point where I can upload a video that's one word. With a title that's one word, I should say. Mental asylums. Were they really all that bad? Ooh, I like that, Emmy. Mental asylums. Were they really all that bad? I like that a lot. That kind of cuts to sort of the core question. Mr. Beast opening a Beast brand asylum? Gross. No, thank you. Don't like that. That was a good one, Emmy. I really like that. Or if we even want to, some people get weird about the about colons, right? And frankly, I'm not a particular fan of them either. So if you really wanted to, minimize it, you could just say, were mental asylums really all that bad? Right? And then you get rid of the colon. I don't know. Other thoughts? Other opinions? If not Arkham Asylum. I do love that game. Button mashing. But yeah, Arkham Asylum is probably not the image that we're going to go for. Oh god. Guess why I got locked in this nut house? That's too a little too clickbaity, yeah. Bring back asylums, but better. Jeffrey. Holy shit. All right, bring back asylums, but better. I like that, Jeffrey. I like that a lot. That's really good. Jeffrey, you might have won this. Unless somebody else can beat you. An argument for asylums. I like that too. That's also a very solid title. And it's sort of that structure, right? Saying like an argument for asylums is very reminiscent of like video essays, which that's kind of what we're doing a little bit. So that is a good option, Dan. I'm going to end up still contributing ideas, even though I think Jeffrey's idea is the best so far. I will end up sort of workshopping these ideas with other people as well. So just because I like it the best doesn't mean that it is the best option. Much video essay like. Yes, exactly. Asylum for asylums sort of fits too. Asylum for asylums. Asylum for asylums. I think it's a little too clever, McBong, if I'm being honest. I like it, right? Because you are mixing two usages of asylum. But if I read that on a YouTube title, I wouldn't get it. That's my personal thoughts. But I appreciate it. I'll put it down. An asylum for asylums. All right. I appreciate y'all. Jeffrey, thank you for that idea. Honestly, love that. Bring back asylums, but better. We're going to wrap it for tonight. I may stream again. I'll probably stream sometime next week, unless something unforeseen happens. Maybe I'll stream later this week. Probably not. But you never know. But it's been really fun. I really love doing this. Yeah, it's always fun hanging out with you guys, and I really appreciate all of the discussion and all of the perspectives that you bring. It really helps me sort of fill out everything. So hope you have a good night. All the best to you too, Dan. And appreciate y'all just coming to hang out, and we'll chat more soon, all right? Take it easy. Bye. Uh-oh. How do I stop? Wow. That's pretty good.